So we are going to make our session very interactive, acknowledging that people are now tired of listening, and tired of sitting. So the first part of our session is going to be a screening of a documentary, stories of young women living in mining communities in Zimbabwe. And after the screening, then allow me to invite the panel so that we can continue with the discussions. It's an 8-minute movie. Hello guys, are you with me? Do we have young women in the room? Ahoy, Africa, ahoy! You say ahoy. Ahoy, Africa, ahoy! Thank you, you are with me. So I would like to request for the technical team. Do you want to stand up and stretch, maybe? All right, you can stand up and stretch. I would like to request the technical team to get ready for the screening. Thank you. Oh, and we have some goodies for those that are going to be actively participating in this particular session. Thank you.
Zimbabwe is a country endowed with many mineral resources and a lot of mining activities taking place. However, the economy does not reflect this. The Zimbabwe mining sector has the potential to drive the economy of the country to greater heights. It is believed that Zimbabwe loses a staggering $100 million every month from illicit financial flows. If this money is channeled through the proper national fiscus, it can turn the country into a middle-income nation as per government aspiration. It is astounding to note that the people residing in the mining communities remain the poorest in the country, with no benefit from the precious minerals trickling down their way. The worst affected of this are the young women staying in these communities who continue to bear the negative effects of illicit financial flows. Some young women from Goldrich Achirus in Mashonaland East share their stories.
Vamaini zvavhara life yatorarama yakaoma. Mvura totochera kure, ofichi tetomukira kuti tiende kuchikoro. Tobva tenda kumvura todhilewa ofichi komboni yese inenge chera mvura kunhuwani. Totononoka kuenda kuchikoro nekuti todaenda kumvura plus huni hakuna magetsi, tuchadoenda kuhuni tione kudzisa mvura dzekugeza. Kliniki futi hamuna, kliniki yakavharwa, totoenda kure kugejo kuseri kwegomo kukliniki. Zvafanana nhasi tatorobva chikoro kwezida unobaiwa vaccine rechi2 kugejo. Chatofamba long distance kutoende kugejo. Apa mwe anenge atorwara story serious zvekuti udotoenda kukliniki. Hauna kana mari kuti waye mota, uchada kufamba futi long distance kuenda kugejo. Saka life yacho yatotorarama yakaoma. Vamwe tiri maform 4 macandidates tetruda kuverenga. Ofichi takabva kuchikoro tichamboitana nemabasa ekuenda kumvura, nguva yekuverenga tichitesiro tokwanisa kuverenga manheru. Hatina mari yekwanisa kutenga masola kuti tione magetsi ekuti tiverenge. Saka zvinova zvinhu zvinotikanganisa kuti nguva yekuverenga tichaiwani nekuda kwekuti hatina magetsi plus mabasa. Masikati tione nguva yekuverenga masikati unenge uchichera mvura uchada kuenda kuhuni. Saka nguva yekuverenga tiri kuishaya. Zvandinonyanyoshuwira nyaya yekliniki. Because kuna vamwe vanotorwara nema-BP, ma-emergency cases anongoapia nenguva dzangosiyana siyana. Saka dai vativhurira kliniki, mvura yaiswawo padhuze kuti tikwanisewo kuita zvinhu zvedu nenguva tisava tichanonoka kuchikoro nekuda kwezvinhu zvakadaro.
Matambudziko arikusangana nevana vedu vechisikana nekuda kwehurovha hwaana baba. Vava kungomitiswa, havacharamba nekuda kwenzara. Vana vedu havachakwanisa kupfuurira mberi nezvikoro, kuzvikoro kwacho vana vari kungodzingwa. Saka havadzingwa nekuda kwekuti hatina kwatinowana mari, vanenge vakangogara pamba. Vava kungodiwa chero nemakorokoza, vanenge vachingobvuma chero murume wasangana nawo. nekuda kwekuti mari yekuti waenderere mberi nechikoro kana zvekuti waiti hapana.
We've seen a number of people coming in to invest. We've seen Chinese coming in to mine granite stones, and this granite stones is being taken from this community and going as well outside the community. Yet they are using the road that has been there, that has been existing, and those roads are already damaged. They need to be they need to be maintained. We actually want to urge even the higher authorities that there must be policies that empower the communities where the resources are coming from.
The young women and girls are the hardest hit when it comes to illicit financial flows, especially those who live in the areas where these resources are coming from.
Vabereki vedu isusu baba vamai vedu vaishanda muno murenimeni varungu vachirimo. Amai angu akabva waberekerwa muno, inini ndakabva ndaberekerwa muno murenimeni. Ndaberekerwa muno murenimeni takangokura tichingoti ndiwo ruzevha rwedu. Nhasi unokauya varunguwo vakuuya mukati menzvimbo inoi vakushedzewa kuti achada vanhu vomurenimeni, tatenga renimeni achada vanhu vomurenimeni, mutori masquata. Isusu tinogara mu1 room nevana, vana vasei 6 vese anogara mu1 room. Mwana wangu akangopiwa mimba ari kuchikoro. Apiwa mimba ari kuchikoro bva ndangozvigamuchira ndokuti hapana kwanga ndichamurasira.
Takapiwa mimba tichiri pachikoro ndaregrese murume wacho takabva tasiyana.
Chinhu chinoitika muno vana vadiki special ma15 years zvichidzika vese vatomumarriage hapana kana wana nendo chikoro achitopedza. Life yacho iri muno munhu yakati omei manje. Sezvino twangofanira kuti inini ndine pamba pedu patinogara ndichienda kuchikoro ndichidzoka. Zvinhu zvandinodya nezvimwe zvandoona, saka madhara emuno netikomana tudiki twakauya nemari tuchinditiwo ndokwanisa kutambira kamwe kondivhevhawo ndotongororwa ndotongosiya zvechikoro because ndinoenda kutoona kuti zvekurorwa zviri nani pane kuenda kuchikoro. Tinchida kuzobatsirawo kuti vana vechisikana vapedze chikoro. Izvo makataisa vazhinji vedu vari muno vasikana vanenge vasara vashoma. Muno hamuna matoilets. Tinototaimira manheru tichingoitira imo muberere memba imomo. Makatongofamba munotongoona tsvina yatongozara. Kwatinocherawo mvura yekugeza tinotopinda mubako. Izvozvo yakasviba yanguva matope gega but tingoishandisa yakadaro. Yekumwa yachona inodhura kuna kana mabhoho padhuze.
Community yedu yeBhindura ine mari pamaonero angu nekuti mamaina atinawo akakurisha zvakanyanyisa muguta reBhindura. Zvicherwa zviri kuwanika munomu hazisi kutibatsira semhuri yeZimbabwe zvatinotarisira kuti zvinge zvichitibatsira kusvika. Takatarisa chipatara chaicho hatina, madzimai vechidiki nemadzimai vari kutambudzika zvikurusa kana nguva yavo ichinge yakwana yokuti vasununguke.
Kadoma is a gold-rich community. However, nothing about the small town reflects that.
Vana vadiki kazhinji muno vari kupinda paproblem yekuti chikoro anokwanisa kuchidropa nekukasika kana kuti ari kuma14 years. Pamwe nekuda kwekukonzero chekuti mari yachaikowo yakakwana kuti aende mberi nechikoro, anobva agara anogona kungomitiswa kana nemakurukota munomu mune varume vakawanda. Anogona kungomitiswa kuti kodzero dzake dzadzvinyirika kuchikoro haana kuenda, amitiswa mwana wacho orambiwa. Ndeimwe challenge yakusangana nayo. Kana kuti wopamba da kuti vechidiki vawanirwa maprojects ekuti vaiti zvokuti nyangwe ndakamitiswa nemwana wangu ndokwanisa kuena living ndega.
Tinosangana nemaproblems evanasikana. Rinotori dambudziko rakanyanyisa. Vana vasikwanisa kupedza zvikoro vari kumitiswa nevana vadiki. Ndo dambudziko rakanyanya kuomesesa muno munharaunda. Ndofunga inyaya ino vanoattractwa nemari dzinoitwa nemamainasi. Saka vana vanopedzera vakuita zvisina kururama nekuda kwemakorokota. Takambogara pasi neutungamiriri tichimboonesa kuti chingava chii chiri kuitika. Takafunga kuti kudai problem yeCovid yakaita kuti paite dambudziko. Kuti kumashure zvanga zvisiko. Kune vanhu vanouya kuzomaina vachibvawo kumatowns vakati kuti vanenge vane mari dzavo. Vanouya nemissionary inokwanisa kuti vakwanise kumaina. Isusu hatikwanisa, hatina missionary inodi. So vakauya nemissionary yavo yanenge vabva nayo somewhere kuna Harare, Kupu whatever kana kuna Kadoma. Vanouyawo maina munomu, then votora gold riya voenda naro. Havaite plowback kuno community. Saka mtiona nzvimbo yedu yakasarira kudai so.
Since 2017, the Zimbabwean government has been vigorously preaching indigenization. However, very few people have benefited from this stance because true indigenization should benefit the poor and the vulnerable.
And once again, my name is Margaret Mutsamvi. I'm coming from an organization called Economic Justice for Women Project. And in partnership with TrustAfrica, we went on a mission to look for the story of a young woman who is living in mining communities to reflect the impact of illicit financial flows on the young woman. There were earlier inquiries from young people, from young women saying, where are we in these conversations? How do we locate ourselves in the discourse? And we're here to say we can have the conversation, and the conversation can start here. So please allow me, all protocols observed, allow me now to invite our panelists. I will be the moderator for the session. So I would like to invite a young lady called Joyce Paraiwa. She is representing the Goromonzi community, where there have been recent discoveries of lithium with a lot of conflict in the communities. And she's specifically here to share the story from her community. And I would like to appreciate TrustAfrica for supporting that we have a community voice in the house. Joyce, let's give it up for Joyce as she comes up on stage to share the story from a community perspective. She is living in a community where the Chinese are coming, they are mining, people are being displaced, there are fights between the community members and investors. So I think we'll give it to her so that she can share that story before we can have interventions from other panelists. Thank you.
Great salutation to you all, ladies and gentlemen. Joyce Paraiwa is my name, and I reside in the area of Goromonzi, that is in the Mashonaland East province of Zimbabwe. I'm here to share with you what I witnessed in this community, the challenges that are being faced by females due to the coming of the Chinese mining the lithium in the area of Goromonzi, and what negative impact it has on the females in this area. Therefore, in the world population analysis, it can be noted that females constitute a higher percentage than males. Therefore, the unemployment of a higher percentage in societies means a continuous poverty perpetuation throughout generations. So I'm going now to highlight the challenges that are being faced by women in the Goromonzi community where lithium is being mined. The first challenge is that only males are being employed there, of which a woman, as long as she's able-bodied, as long as she's able to work, she must also be employed. Some may be single mothers. Some may be just self-reliant. So if she is not given that chance to work for herself, she will suffer because she won't have any source of income anymore. Another challenge is that some may be widowed. When the husband dies at work, they are not getting anything. So it means the death of the husband will mean the beginning of her suffering life. For example, some few months ago, when a lorry hit a cabin where the workers worked, these Chinese are not even building houses for people to stay. As far as we know, if someone is running a mine, when you are running a mine, you should build some houses for your workers where they stay. But the Chinese are not doing so, and people were staying in the cabins. And when there was a lorry that hit the cabin, one man died on the spot, and another one died in the hospital. No compensation, nothing was done. So it means the beginning of a suffering life to the widow and the orphans that survived. These do not just end up being challenges to women on the mine, but also in the markets. They sometimes come to demand the goods to be sold to them at a lower price, not in a negotiation manner, but in a demanding manner. Imagine that a woman who is working on the market to earn a living is being demanded to reduce the price of the commodities that she's selling, and the benefit of the Chinese, not on her benefit. How will she earn profits? How will she survive? Another challenge is that these activities are contributing to the feminization of poverty. Most notably, it has been associated with the following claims: that women are the majority of the world's poor, and the prevalence of poverty among women is increasing more than men over time. Furthermore, the growing of poverty among women is linked with the feminization of household headships. Another challenge is the eviction from their original homes due to the invasion of their land by the Chinese, who would have an interest in mining at that place. Therefore, a woman now has a burden of wondering what to do next with the children, because the accommodation will be gone. Therefore, one can then note that the way the Millennium Developmental Goals failed is more likely to be the same way the Sustainable Developmental Goals is going to fail, as long as gender disparity and inequality is not addressed. SDG number 5 aims to achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. Some of the targets of the SDG goal number 5 include ending all forms of discrimination against women and girls everywhere, and eliminate all forms of violence to all females in the public and private spheres, including trafficking, sexual exploitation, and other forms of exploitation. Nevertheless, aiming to achieve gender equality seems to be chasing a wild goose, as long as negative attitude towards females and the ignorance of their potential endures. Thank you.
Round of applause. Very touching narratives, even some that we saw in the documentary. It said that the rich parts of our country, like the title of the documentary is Living on Top of Wealth with a question mark. It's a question to say, is this how communities and people who are living on top of gold, on top of lithium, on top of copper, is this how they should live? Is this how they look like? No schools, no hospitals, no clinic, closed, poor infrastructure. It is a sad story. I moved around and I distributed colorful pieces of paper. Please, if you're heart willing, write a solidarity message to the young women. So now I think I'll give it to Comrade Mukasiri Sibanda to help us understand the context, and also for him to share his reaction to the presentation.
Thank you, Comrade. So I had requested that before I speak, because normally I struggle when it comes to motivation, they play me, or us rather, Survival from Bob Marley. Just a minute. Everybody stand up and then enjoy. Please.
How can you be sitting there telling me that you care? That you care? When every time I look around, the people suffer in the suffering in every way. In every way. Say, no, 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 no. The survivors, yes, the black survivors. I tell you what, some people got everything, some people got nothing. Some people got hopes and dreams. Some people got ways and means. Na 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 na. We're the survivors. Yes, the black survivors. Yes, we're the survivors.
My name is Mukasiris Banda. I coordinate the Stop the Bleeding campaign. When it comes to illicit financial flows, it all started with the high-level panel report that was led by His Excellency Thabo Mbeki, a team that established that then Africa was losing more than 50 billion annually through illicit financial flows. They were able to spot the bleeding, and that it is the multinational corporations who are the main culprits, accounting for 65% of the losses through tax avoidance and tax evasion. Then 30% attributed to criminal activities, 5% to corruption. But you know, when you spot a problem, they say a problem known is a problem I've solved. You now need to go behind, to step up. Is this a priority for Africa? How big is the problem? And that's why in the discourse of development financing for Africa, we argue that by curbing illicit financial flows, Theo, comrade, you can help me, Africa's debt problem as it stands right now, if we are to stop whatever losses we have incurred since 1970 to 2018, you would find that Africa can pay whatever is being owed and still remain with some resources. If we were to curb the leakages, to reverse those leakages. This is why it is very important to have this conversation. The UN Conference on Trade and Development even goes a step further to tell us that half of the finance gap for meeting the Sustainable Development Goals could be plugged if we curb illicit financial flows. Others, they tell us that what Africa gains through aid and foreign direct investment is dwarfed, is less than what Africa loses through illicit financial flows. So this is why this conversation is very important. And relating it to mining, I think it's very important also that we understand that it is the epicenter of the losses that we are suffering as a result. So the spot part done, the top part of it is that it tops the agenda. That's why we opted to say, let's stop the bleeding. But the idea behind the ports is to take this discourse to the people. Because when we talk about illicit financial flows, we look at it from a very technocratic angle. But this is an issue that affects livelihoods. That is why we talk about ports. And then post-bleeding, we have Agenda 2063. We have got the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So it's not only about curbing illicit financial flows, but understanding that Africa has got a vision, the Africa we want. And part of the challenges that are emanating from this documentary is also the past tense in our conversation of what we would want when we stop the bleeding, resources channeled for development. So let me end by, I've got a small story that I want to share with you. I think two, and then the last point, then I'll close. The first one is that there is a fable that I once read. It speaks about a fox that tries to cross a flooded river. And it got worn out by the torrent, the currents, the flow of the river, that it barely reached the bank. It was so tired. So you know those blood-sucking flies, they started to swarm it. It did not have any energy to run away. So then the hedgehog, seeing the plight of the fox, offered to chase the blood-sucking flies. The fox refused. The hedgehog was confused. Then the fox, seeing the face of the hedgehog, said, "My friend, this swarm you see here has already taken its portion and is full. It's protecting me. If you chase it away, a hungrier swarm will descend, and that's my end." Why am I telling you this story? We are talking about Chinese miners. I told you when I started, I said, let's play survival. There is another song from Bob Marley. It speaks to rat race. Always, don't forget your destiny, but remember your history. You understand? In trying to sometimes deal with the evil, we are told that you risk greater evil. In Africa, we have had plunder, years of plunder from the slavery, colonialism, and the neo-colonial challenges that we are facing. And when slavery was abolished and all agreed it was a heinous crime, who was compensated? It is the slave owners and not the what? The slaves. That system of injustice that when you fight colonialism, at the end of it and you gain independence, who got compensated? Those that looted, that earned their wealth from plundering, were allowed to go scot-free. And in the case of Zimbabwe, we know right now that we still have to pay 3.5 billion for taking back our land. And it's another debt that we are talking about. The question here is about, do we control our resources? Do we control our what? Our resources. Right now, I see most of you, all of us, we have cell phones, right? We have laptops. There is cobalt here. You understand? And this cobalt now through recyclables is going to be retrieved. But what we own as cobalt is underground. The moment when you mine it, you sell it, you have lost your right. Why don't we talk about the discourse of like what's happening in the circular economy, what is called usufruct? Those that are part of the legal profession will know that instead of selling your property, you lease it, someone can enjoy it, can use it. You understand? And pay rent to it. He's not supposed to destroy it or supposed to destroy it or put it to waste. So even anytime you see this cell phone or it's going to be retrieved, still we can say Congo is still part of this as a claim of property. But you can't say it anymore. You get what I'm trying to say? I don't know if you are picking it very well, but I just wanted to elevate our challenges when you're saying reimagine the challenges that you are facing. Right. So the last part of it is simple. Can you write the word charm as I sit down? Can you write the word charm? Charm. CHARM. Charm.
Charm.
CHARM. And then you write another word, aid. AID. So if you block the C in charm, what do you get? Yes. So this is why Africa has got an economic charm when it comes to its natural resource, when it comes to human resource, when it comes to its asset. But that charm is always blocked. In the end, we always talk about harm. You get it? So when you talk about aid, you have to add a capital P before the word, and what you get is what? Paid. Africa does not need aid. This is the narrative when we talk about illicit financial flows. What Africa needs is to be paid fairly for the exploitation of the resources on the continent. We will be well off, comrades. We don't need to have these stories of talking about lithium, about our resources that are being extracted, and those that are marginalized, the people, women, girls, youth, being left behind when it comes to development. Thank you, comrades.
You can see how passionate he is about the issues of Africa bleeding. Viva Africa, viva! Viva, viva Africa, viva! Viva, viva the rule makers, viva! Comrades, we are at war. It's not going to be easy. Now I'll hand it over to Dr. Betule to share her perspective and her understanding of the presentation. Over to you, Doc.
Thank you very much, Margaret. And I will not be adding another song, but also I think we have done enough justice in terms of the intellectual debate. We've heard from a number of our colleagues since yesterday morning on what we are dealing with on the continent in terms of the debt crisis. and also how resources are leaving our communities to finance things that have nothing to do with the communities that they serve and are not in any way building up on the public services that should be contributing to the livelihoods of people like Joyce and the community that she comes from in Goromonzi. And so what I want to do is really just to summarize, in about 3 key words, 3 C's as I call it, that will also seek to talk through the reimagine, rethink and reorganize and remobilize that we're looking at. And this is because we need to now look forward to what we can do together to ensure that we are addressing these challenges and looking at ways that they affect our communities and how we can address these challenges from the community level as well. So the 3 C's that I want to talk about, the first one is connect. The second one is community. And the third one is can do or capacitate. And with connect, I'm looking at the stories of people like Joyce and the community that she comes from, with an organization or a company that is probably debt-financed to do the work that it is doing, but is not actually giving back to that community. If we are not connecting these stories from the grassroots, from the community level, as we have heard from Joyce, we are not going to be able to fully understand the impact that this is having on young people, on the public services that are supposed to be delivered in our communities, on the social development aspects, such as education, as we saw in the documentary, such as health services, water deliveries, and so on. So it's very, very important for us to connect the macroeconomic policy debates and discourse to what is happening in the communities and bringing alongside the stories that we are hearing from communities such as the one that Joyce is coming from. The second C that I want to talk about is community. We as a community are able to remobilize, and I believe that through different campaigns we've been able to mobilize and to organize ourselves in a way that we can amplify our voices on the issues of the debt crisis, as well as illicit financial flows and how they're impacting the communities that we are living in. And by this, I'm also looking at how we can help to, as a community, as a movement, build together a common voice, as we've heard through the last couple of days, that will bring these issues to the attention of our policymakers. The last one that I want to talk about is can do. We need to be able to work with communities to also understand and to showcase what is happening in their communities as a result of what we are seeing with illicit financial flows, companies that are coming in, extracting resources, but also not necessarily putting back. Also from our governments, where most of these investments are debt financed. We see this in communities, mining communities. I work a lot with small-scale farmers in agricultural farming communities. And most of what we are seeing is that most of the public investments that are happening whether it's extractives or it's in agriculture, most of them are usually debt financed. But in terms of actual benefit to those that are in those communities, we see that it is very minimal. And when I say we can do, I think what I'm saying is that we need to change the narrative, and we can ensure that these benefits do accrue to the communities that are being served by our governments. And so it's very, very important for us to be able to say that where decisions are being made, how are those decisions being made? And are they still open for debate and for dialogue, especially to ensure that the community voice, young people's voices, other voices can be heard? And who is going to pay off the debt especially when what is at stake is social development. And so for us as a collective, for us as a community here at this AFCOT conference, we need to be really looking at how we can remobilize, reorganize, rethink, and reimagine how we do this. One of the things that has been critical to our own understanding of this conversation, the debt crisis, and as well as illicit financial flows, is our work on ensuring that we are doing a lot of research as well as knowledge building on the topic. And not only in terms of the intellectual thought pieces that we've been getting, but also hearing the voices of the communities. And we are proud to have worked with the Economic Justice for Women's project to also collect, to do the research within the communities, such as in Joyce's community, to really understand what the issues are in those communities as they are influenced by debt financing and the debt crisis, as well as illicit financial flows. And we're sitting here looking forward to the launch of important pieces of work that I will encourage all of you to read, which is a collection of the voices and of the information that is coming from these communities on how they are being impacted by the debt crisis as well as illicit financial flows. Thank you.
We need to change the narrative, and we need to empower our communities so that they can be the leading voice in this conversation. Very powerful indeed. For now, I think I will just open the floor briefly so that we can get into launching the research report that she talks about.
Thank you so much. My name is Fidialis, and I was just reflecting on IFFs, and when it comes to illicit financial flows, at the center of it is corruption. And you see corruption, and even countries that have low levels of transparency, they also tend to be conduits of proceeds of crime. So how do you see that relationship within the sector, especially in the extractive sector? Then also on the video, I would like to know what we are doing to keep girls in school, or what we can do, especially in Zimbabwe, where the documentary has been captured, because we will solve half of the problems if we are able to keep our girls in school. Thank you.
Joyce, I just wanted to understand what forms of resistance, therefore, are there in your community, and how can we give solidarity to the kinds of resistance and also to the kinds of alternatives that you think possible within your context?
It's okay. Let's take the complete round of questions and then we can respond.
Thank you very much. Okay. When I see young people, I feel excited that we're a growing population. I don't have a question, but just to say to you, Joyce, we have to continue the advocacy. We have to continue to demand our space, because you are talking about what is being mined and you are not enjoying the facilities. I want you to look beyond that. Even within the community you are living, what is being mined in that community, you who are living in that community have never seen it before. I was explaining to a few people that in my country, the biggest diamond, I've never seen a diamond before, and I'm living in the country that has the largest diamond. But when I traveled to Brussels, that is where I saw the largest diamond coming from my country. Not only that, but I had to pay to go and see it. You can imagine the frustration that I have to go and pay to see the largest diamond coming from my country. It's sad. So all we need to do is to continue the campaign and advocacy and demand our space, because it is the entry point that has it. If you are not seated on the table where these policies have been made on behalf of the community people, who they pay loyalty to, we don't know. The chiefs and the elders in the community that receives, we don't know. We don't know what the funds are used for. All I ask, continue the spirit, advocate, lobby, and take your space.
Thank you so much. Okay, to my brother who posed a question for me, I beg you to repeat your question so that I may respond.
Yes, sister. I was saying, how are you resisting? In what ways are you resisting this exclusion and oppression and extraction? And how can we give you the solidarity you need to improve the lives of women and girls in the mining sector in Zimbabwe?
Okay, let me say this. When we go to the public spheres, like markets or where many people gather, we try by all means to show the public, to show the citizens that these minerals being taken, which are going to the sea via Mozambique, are our inheritance, so we have to fight for this. We can't continue being colonized over our own minerals, yet our land is being degraded like this, and this is not benefiting us at all, but it just causes a degradation of our land. So we must wake up as the children of Zimbabwe. Let us not be silent.
And thank you very much, Comrade Fambai, for offering solidarity and support. And we will be in touch with you because we know where to find you. Maybe I'll try to respond to the first question that she asked, to say what is being done in Zimbabwe to keep the girl child in school. I must highlight that there are a number of programs, mostly from civil society organizations and regional and global development partners, to keep the girl child in school. However, these efforts are still not enough. The number in need is outgrowing the resources. That we always have programs to raise funds or to match girls with a sponsor who can pay for their fees. Right now, in a recent visit to the Wange mining community, we discovered 7 brilliant young women with 14 and 15 points doing sciences who just dropped out of school. So the challenge is still bigger than us, but I think we need to continue pushing, because you are right to say keeping the girl child in school is the only way that they can transition from a point of vulnerability to regain their power and control. I hope I answered that well.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. Mine is just an advice. Looking back at home, I like giving examples about what's happening back in home so that maybe we can look at how we can go about things. In Botswana, every mining town is the best. They have schools, infrastructure is okay, and I think it's because there's a policy that holds accountable to every mining company that is maybe, be it on a subcontract or the main DBS itself. So they have where they sign a policy to say, if we are going to mine in that town, or if we are going to be involved in any business in that town, we are going to give back through what we call CIS. It's called the Community Involvement Services. They are mandated to do so. Even when I'm doing charitable work, I know I approach them and they will give me money for it. So my suggestion is maybe we can benchmark from the policies like we have in Botswana. Maybe they can help Zimbabwe, because it's very, very sad to see a mining town that even doesn't have health facilities. Yeah. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll give our panelists a chance to respond each before we can just, we want to launch this beautiful research report and we are running out of time. So I'll hand over to you in whatever order. You can perhaps respond to some of the issues that were raised, and maybe a word to a parting word for the session.
I want to start by sloganeering, because we want to bring people together. If I say Sisi, you respond saying Ndio Tuko. Sisi.
Ndio Tuko.
Guys, you know the struggle. Sometimes when you are confronted with danger, with the enemy, and you are seeking energy, you have to respond showing that level of energy. Sisi!
Ndio Tuka.
Sisi!
Ndio Tuko.
Yeah, this message is very clear. I told you I love reggae music. None but ourselves can free our minds. Emancipate yourself from mental slavery. When in Kiswahili people say Sisi Ndio Tuko, there is no question of are you who used to come. It is this generation that has got the responsibility to fulfill the mandate. As Franz Fanon say, each generation has got a responsibility to discover, fulfill, or betray their generational mandate. So why are we elevating the conversation on illicit financial flows, responding to the first question, looking at it at the largest culprits, the multinational corporations? Yes, the connections are there between corruption and illicit financial flows, criminality and illicit financial flows. But just to give you a sense of why we are so focused on this matter, is that even corruption, though it wears the face of the public sector of politicians in Africa, it takes two to tango. Read about the Glencoe story. The US fined Glencoe 1.1 billion for corruption activities mostly committed in African countries. The UK, I think it was close to 300 million for corruption activities by Glencoe in Africa. You understand? Yet when we talk about corruption, we only relate to it from only a public sector or from a political perspective. So it is important to understand the structural barriers that we face. I think the part of reimagining, which is part of this conversation, that things cannot continue the way they are, that the producer, if we are to take an example of milk, you milk the cow, but that cow will never see the cheese. We refuse to be treated like that as Africans. You understand? If you want our cobalt, it produces your cell phone, we want also to be part of the cell phone. If you want the lithium battery, because they produce clean energy, we also want to enjoy the clean what? Energy. Don't talk about any other benefits. You know, sometimes we complicate things when it comes to benefit sharing. You want my product to produce something, so let us share. Where is the problem? But you are talking about Africa as part of the energy transition agenda in terms of critical minerals, but yet Africa is crippled by energy poverty. You see the paradox. Before you even look at the numbers, it tells you something is not add up, because you can't impair the value of cobalt from Congolese. You can't impair the value of the critical minerals from Africa, and you've got the world that powers in terms of technological advancement. It will not work that way. So as I end, I repeat again, Sisi! None but ourselves can set free Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Parting words, let's emancipate ourselves from mental slavery. We are slaves. As we sit here wearing our suits, our high heels, our outfits from Ghana, Europe, London, we are slaves. That's very painful. So we have to emancipate ourselves from this slavery. Over to you, Doctor.
Yeah, so I think the comrades have answered the questions, and particularly the one that was on illicit financial flows. And I just wanted to say, just to very practically think, for us to think through the practical ways that we can connect community voices to the continental, regional, national discourse and conversations on the debt crisis and illicit financial flows. it's very critical to also put the same information that we have here in the hands of community people, community mobilizers such as Joyce, who is at the forefront of getting to understand why a lithium mining company is not able to support the community that it is working in, and to give back, not only in what we is CSI, the corporate social investment, but in terms of the public financing that is coming from our own government in terms of what they are getting from that mining company. So it's very, very important for us to take this kind of knowledge, this kind of information back to these communities that we work with so that they can also start to ask questions. The campaign, the movement will be built from there to ensure that we are not leaving anyone behind, as we have been saying, and that we are addressing the very systemic issues that are at the foundation of the state crisis. And I'll leave it there.
Yes, thank you very much. A round of applause. Viva Africa, viva! Ah, Africa, ukona, muriko ere, are you there? Come on, guys. They will take everything while we are sleeping. Viva Africa, viva! Viva Africa, viva! Viva women of Africa, viva! Viva Rumeka, viva! Thank you so much, that's better. So the last part of our session is Economic Justice for Women project, together with our partners. We set out to establish the relationship between public debt and young women as an area that we had found was understudied, and as a young women-focused organization, so that as these conversations continue that we are having now, young women can also be a part of feeding into the agenda, a regional agenda, and that we should all own it, so that the community voice that was mentioned earlier leads our way and doesn't leave anyone behind. So we have conducted a research and came up with this research paper. It's titled Unearthing the Impacts of Public Debt on Young Women in Zimbabwe. And it has sort of led us to launch a campaign for debt justice for our young women in the region. The consultant who did the research paper couldn't be available to break down the contents of the research paper, but I will try to break down from my own understanding. For Zimbabwe, there is an almost impossible target by our government to clear external debt by the year 2025. So I'm talking about a country which has had an economic crisis for 3 decades. And that's a good target to wanting to clear their debt by 2025. But you also want to look at how feasible that is, looking at the state of our economy. But perhaps we do have the resources, like has been reflected by the topic on illicit financial flows. The amount of resources that are coming out of the country, perhaps they are enough to pay off the debt, but perhaps they were enough to not even borrow this money in the first place. But, you know, the leakage is continued. So in this research, the main objective was to develop an evidence-based baseline to strengthen knowledge base that enhance the positioning of young women in the debt discourse in Zimbabwe and the region. And it was exploring the relationship between debt justice in Zimbabwe and the resultant status of young women. I will just mention the key findings, but maybe before that, the methodology was a mixture of qualitative assessments and review of existing research and literature, and there was also practical experiences sharing through focus group discussions and key informant interviews. There was also interviews with national, local, and regional stakeholders to include government at government level and independent commissions. And then there was also an assessment of the legislative framework at a local, national, and at a regional level to help analyze the findings of the research. But over and above, the findings of the research, the main findings were that as we repay our debts, it means that we are reducing our national fiscus, which often compromises the provision of socio-economic services or rights, whichever way you want to put it. The repayment of debt has come with the violation of a lot of socio-economic rights on all the citizens, young people, old people, all women, but particularly young women. Why? Because they are the largest consumers of these socio-economic rights. So for instance, the right to education. If we want to talk about the right to education, the most vulnerable groups that are affected are the young people. And we know, due to the structural barriers, social barriers, sometimes religious, the girl child is often the sacrifice when things really become difficult in the household. So those were some of the findings. And in terms of the need for sexual reproductive health rights, we also found that our young women is in most need of these services. We were talking about period poverty, that an ordinary girl cannot afford to buy a pack of 10 sanitary pads every month. And we are still talking about sanitary period poverty in this age. And then we also talked about decent work in an economy where about more than 95% of the people are employed in the informal sector, which is an unsafe operating environment, which is largely not regulated, which sometimes we are not sure whether it's legal or it's not, because sometimes people are allowed to sell, sometimes they are being chased away and their wares being confiscated. So those are some of the challenges, and also issues of decent housing that they were really key. But over and above, we also, the research also concluded that women are paying the larger part of the debt. How so? Because they are having to provide those services that the government is supposed to be paying for. Somebody mentioned this earlier in an earlier presentation, where the government was supposed to provide, to take care of the sick and elderly, and when it says it cannot, the sick and elderly's care is given at home, usually with the mothers, but when the mothers are doing something else, then it's the girl child. So we found that they are also carrying a huge burden of unpaid care work. And by doing so, they are also paying for the debt. It's an opportunity cost. It's time and resources they could use elsewhere. We also realized that for a country like Zimbabwe, this has led to the implementation of the austerity measures. There's an increase in tax. There's a new tax that was introduced, a 2% transfer tax on all mobile transfer transactions. And most of the women are not bankable in the mainstream banking sector. So they are actually using these mobile transfers as a form of banking. So if they impose a tax on mobile transfers, it is mostly targeting those that are not able to bank in the mainstream financial sector, which is women, young people, and other marginal communities. So the austerity measures have also reduced the spending on other basic things that may be needed in the household, costing livelihoods, costing health, and sometimes education, as some of the findings of this coming out of the research. The other key groups that were deliberately targeted by the research were women living with HIV, young women young women survivors of early child marriages. I'm just going through it. The impact of young women in the informal sector, young women with disability, young women in rural areas. These are some of the groups that the research was deliberately targeting to assess their vulnerability in terms of the debt injustices. And some of the cases that were coming also out of Goromonzi were indicating that for young women living with HIV and AIDS, there was a requirement by local clinics that for you to collect your medication, your ART medication, you have to pay $1 administration fee. And for those that really could not afford, they then would delay access to their medication, or some of them would actually default, which would mean that the their social well-being and security would have been compromised. This lack of medications generally in public hospitals is something that we also think that the attempts to mobilize more resources towards servicing the debt has neglected the key social services of community that we need as citizens. Also, according to the National Development Strategy 1, there is a key thrust to fully and or partially privatize the public institutions. And this has actually been really key in the health services. There's been a lot of private hospitals sprouting in Zimbabwe and the region. And then there's a lot of also private schools, a lot of other parastatals being privatized, partially privatized, becoming, you know, the neoliberal approach. And for the groups that have always been like the faces of poverty, I'm talking about women, it is then becoming difficult for them to access those services or to afford them. There's been new trends where children have to go for extra lessons during the holidays and they are paid for. It's extra money. If you cannot afford, then it means your child is going to miss out. It has also meant that the civil services, the civil servants are not paid as much as they should be getting. A lot of frustration in the civil service. It means they can also not give their full, you know, effort to their jobs. If they are teachers, if they are doctors and nurses, seeing a lot of unrest, demonstrations, strikes, and go-slows, which compromise the provision of these social services that are basic. So in short, I think I will just leave it at that and say that I have a few copies of this research paper that I can give out physically, but then it can also be accessed on our website, www.ejwp.co.zw. You can check out both the banners for our website, and you can download it after the launch. It will be available for you to download. But I'll hand over to the panelists to respond or to share their reflections rather, or their thoughts, and then we can open up to the floor before we wrap it up. Who is ready? Anybody, guys? Ladies first? Yes. Give it up, give it up, give it up.
Yeah, good for our last session, Margaret, definitely. So thank you very much, Margaret. Do you mind to hold up the book so that people see the research that has been developed by Economic Justice for Women's Project? And just to say that, once again, it's commendable that there is an effort to not only collect the information on and understanding the issues that are systemic and inherent in some of these communities that we're talking about in this very conference. I think this is a research that is to inform us in terms of how we take the community voices into those policy-making spaces, to ask how the decisions are made, and to ask how the impacts of public debt on these communities will be addressed. And so just to say congratulations to you as Economic Justice for Women's Project for the different research themes that you've looked at, the impact of illicit financial flows on women, also looking at mining communities, the impact of public debt on women. And we really look forward to how this will help to influence and to give us an evidence base for the campaign that you're going to be developing in the future. Well done.
Yeah, I would say, in the abundance of water, the fool is thirsty. And this is what you get when you talk about a country which is said to be mineral rich, the center of attention when it comes to provision of lithium, providing lithium. But let me just say a simple story to relate to the research that has been done. My sister joined this civil service in 2002 as a teacher. So last year, she had to do an operation, a medical procedure. But as a civil servant, you would think at least the government would be responsible through the medical aid scheme for a condition. But the family had to pool resources to support with the medical bills. So imagine if citizens are subsidizing government to make their workers have social protection, how hard it is. Then now, just understand how hard it is. We are talking about a teacher for more than 2 decades with no medical aid. And if in the public sector, in the private sector, the medical aid scheme is not working, what it does is that it increases the demand of public services. And those that suffer most are the marginalized women and girls. So I just wanted you to pause and reflect how in the abundance of water, fools are thirsty. Thank you.
The social contract between the people and their leadership would have been broken and trust would have been lost. So this is why you find that there is no communication, there's no correlation in terms of what your leadership is trying to do and the issues that you really want to be resolved. The social contract has been broken. I'll open up to the floor, maybe 2 or 3 people, because we are running out of time, and then we can have our panelists respond, and then we can wrap it up. Any young women who wants to have their voice, I'll give you a priority. Any reflections, reflections on the research, or any word of encouragement, thought, anything? Yes, comrade. Comrade.
Yeah, thank you very much. I want to extend my congratulations for launching this important piece of work that I believe is going to contribute a lot in efforts towards debt justice. And further, just to complement the thrust of giving particular attention to young women in relation to the extractives, there is a huge gap in that area. Mostly people generalize the effects of extractivism and also around public debt. But you have done a great job to go an extra mile and unearth the impacts of public debt on young women in the extractives. So we hope that many other partners will see the opportunity to collaborate with you and develop further to bridge the gaps and also harness the opportunities around the recommendations that you found in your report. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. There's someone here. Please, I put some colorful notes on your table. Can you just write a solidarity message to the young women in the region? We are going to pin them up in our office as a reminder of your support, and we will take snippets and throw them up on our Twitter, on our Facebook, just to know that there are people who remember us. It's good for them to know that you are with them in their struggles. Thank you. Please go ahead.
All right, thank you. I hope I'm not my contribution will come out in a good way. I was just thinking as I was listening to our presenter, you know, one thing that we have kept on saying conference after conference is looking up to the government, but are we getting the response that we want? So then
isn't it time to change the narrative? Or isn't it time to change where we look for the solutions? Maybe that's not where our, sorry to use this word, salvation is going to come from.
Deliverance.
Yes, the deliverance is going to come from. So where should it be coming from? I think it's also time. Then on another note, where we are empowered, are we using the channels? For example, we are supposed to go for voting. How many of those young people in those areas actually went to cast their vote? When we are supposed to redress some of those policies and everything, and I know with the issues of water and everything, but do we then prioritize, because water is a need that I need now, but when it comes to policy, if it's being revised, it's revised now, and the next revision will be in the next 5-10 years. Are we then telling the women, the young women, the ladies, how important it is to actually participate in some of these forums, so that we tend to even prioritize some of those things? So rather than for us to come each and every time, you know, we continue saying these things, we don't have the clinics, we don't have the what, and it seems those that are supposed to then deliver these things, they seems to be ignoring. So what then do we need to do? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I like that you raised a question and then you answered it. When you say that is our solution with the government, but later on you say we need to push for changes in policy, which is a government mandate. So I think we really cannot run away from, when we do our advocacy, to target them as a key stakeholder. But I think what you are saying there is that we need to think outside of the box, and perhaps use platforms like this one that we have, which is an alternative platform that will probably feed into the regional advocacy strategy. So thank you very much. Guys, would you like to respond, and then maybe a last word, and then we can round up the session? Right? Good. I'll start with you. Just if you want to respond to anything, or if you want to say your last words to the people, and then you pass on the mic.
Thank you so much. And I thank you all for the recommendations that you passed and your contributions. Thank you so much. That's all I can say for now.
Hope is a currency that we cannot afford to devalue. We keep on fighting, and we are confident in victory. We have suffered enough from slavery, from colonialism, and this evil that we are confronted with. And we know from the past, as we look to the future, that is bright. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's emancipate ourselves from slavery. It keeps coming.
Okay, my last words now are to the whole of Africa. Yes, we had been living in a pre-colonial era. We became colonized, and we were claimed to be independent. We were claimed to be free from colonization and slavery, yet we are still colonized in a way like this, where our resources are being looted, where we are being robbed by the countries that claim to have left us long back. So let's work towards our real independence, our real freedom, for our resources to be processed and used in Africa, not to be processed overseas, not to be taken out of our countries, yet our countries are being degraded, yet our countries are being devalued. So let's wake up, Africa. Let's protect our resources. Let's unite. Thank you.
Powerful. Thank you, Joyce. Thank you so much. Your last word.
Joyce,
You want Joyce's word to be the last word?
That was the last word.
Okay, she's saying she's giving her the honor of giving the last word. I can take that. I can take that. Thank you so much, colleagues, for joining our session. You made it worth it. I hope that you've written a solidarity message for Joyce and her friends back at home. I had brought in a few items that we wanted to give to the people that took part in the session. So feel free to come forward, perhaps, I think, and then we can just hand them over to those that have not received anything.